The first record where I was like kind of studying the lyrics was the Treacherous 3 had a record called Feel the Heartbeat, and the beat was the heartbeat. It's the same thing with the Sugar Hill record.
Now what you hear is not a test, I'm rapping to the beat. And me, the groove, and my friends are gonna try to move your feet.
That was Good Times on Rapper's Delight, right? The fact that they were rapping over very familiar beats, for me, those were records that stood out to me. I would make my mother buy these records when she went to the record store, and I would just play them over and over because the beat was very familiar, but they were doing something different on it. They were rapping and there were stories.
Broken glass everywhere, people pissing on the stage, you know they just don't care. I can't take the smell, can't take the noise, got no money to move out, I guess I got no choice.
I think the message was also a big one because of the content of that song. So it was like you're paying attention and you're like, am I learning something here? Hold on a second, this is like school. That's what spoke to me very early on in hip hop.
I'm trying not to lose my head.
My name is Kim Osorio. I'm a hip hop journalist and also a producer. I was born and raised in the Bronx, New York. When I was growing up, my father never even graduated the 8th grade, and he ran numbers. And my mother was on welfare. She worked 3 jobs. She worked for the phone company, she sold Avon, Tupperware, that was one. At a very early age, it was instilled in me that I needed to go to college, but I didn't know what I was gonna do. The careers that I thought were successful careers were lawyer or doctor. So I always thought I would go to law school and become a lawyer. Essentially, I did go to law school, but I didn't become a lawyer. I never practiced law because when I got out, my writing career took off. I'm in college and I'm trying to find my way, right? But I always loved hip hop. I grew up in the Bronx. I always loved the music, but it was a hobby. Writing was a hobby. So I didn't even know that being a writer was something that I could make money doing. I decided to become an intern at different record labels. And I was working at BMG Distribution in the marketing department. I was working at Profile Records as an intern because I knew I wanted to work in hip hop. Somewhere in the mid-90s, someone told me I should write. And I started to write about hip hop and I started to get these articles. And I think one of the first people that gave me a shot was Havelock Nelson. Havelock used to have the rap column in Billboard magazine. He had me work with him and write the column. And at the bottom of his column, it says, additional reporting by Kim Osorio. And that was like a huge thing for me to be able to have my words in Billboard magazine.
I'm New York to the heart, but got love for all.
I wrote for some of the fanzines before I wrote for The Source. Like I wrote for Black Beat, Right On. You know, I was doing articles, I was doing interviews for newspapers that you probably never heard of. And that was giving me the access, right? I was getting in with the publicists. They were starting to recognize that I had a voice, but my goal was to get to The Source magazine. I started writing for The Source probably 98, and I got assigned the Lord Tariq and Peter Gunn's Mic Check. They had a hit record out called Deja Vu, and it was all about the Bronx. Riggs Morales assigned me the Mic Check. So it was like a small feature in the magazine, and it was the lead mic check because they were newly signed to Columbia Records. So I did that article and I asked some tough questions, and I remember Riggs was like, you really asked those questions? You asked them that? And from there, it kind of grew into a regular freelance gig until eventually I got to be the associate music editor at The Source magazine in the year 2000. It was different for me to be in the music department at The Source because it was very male dominated. For me, it was prestigious to be able to say, yeah, no, I don't just work at The Source, I'm the music department. Like, I give out the mics. I was part of the mic rating committee at that time. From associate music editor, I became the music editor a couple of years after that. And then ultimately the goal was the editor-in-chief job. But the way that it happened, it kind of happened a lot quicker than I thought. And that rise, I think, was unexpected because there had never been a girl that had been the editor-in-chief of The Source magazine. So that was a huge accomplishment for me. I'm in a creative business, so I'm in the business of writing, right, and storytelling, and I do that in different areas, whether it's television or in print or online, and I come up with new ways to do that. But you also have to be true to your audience, right? People want me to tell stories. What we were doing at The Source in print publications was going to transition, especially with technology and how fast technology was advancing. We used to have a research department that would take the tapes after we did the interview and go through every quote that we put in the magazine and make sure that it was actually said on the tape. So there were all of these checks and balances, but we had a month before we could print and publish. Nobody's waiting a month anymore. This idea of writing an article, doing all of the research, doing your homework, fact checking. This is the microwave generation. You've got to write it and you've got to print it right away. Because the business and technology is moving so quickly, writers have had to evolve. Yes, I do believe that has diluted the art of journalism, because people don't want to be held accountable and they don't want to, be responsible for what they say. They just really want the clicks and the likes and the attention, because we're also in the attention era. But I still believe that the good stuff stands out. If you look at a lot of the mainstream publications, it's all hip hop stuff on there that's getting clicks. Hip hop is really driving pop culture, American culture. And so these are our stories. We need to be a little bit more delicate and handhold the way that we tell them. Today, in 2023, in hip hop, everybody's their own brand. But we're also in the day and age of social media. So you've got your profiles, your IG, whatever platform you use to get your voice and to have your voice be heard. Back then, it was a little different, because the brand that we pushed was The Source. As people started to get recognized for their writing, right, the bylines were a thing. But if you go back to The Source magazine and you look at the bylines, a lot of times they're very small. Not the way that it is now, where if someone said something. So after I left The Source, and I had a lot of other things happening as well, writing a book was probably the biggest thing that I did to build my personal brand. But it was still at a time where I think companies were afraid of the power that we have in hip hop. So a lot of times, if you pushed your brand too hard, they looked at it like you're self-serving. They don't necessarily want to hire somebody who's all about pushing themselves. When I got to Global Grind in 2008, that was a big change in the industry and the way that writers were perceived, because that's like the blog era. What we were doing at Global Grind was building people's individual brands. So we were signing bloggers and helping to give them capital to blow themselves up. I remember back at The Source, the big thing with a lot of the editors was take yourself out of the story. Writing has always been very personal to me. I'm in every story that I've ever written in some way, right? If you go back, like there's a reference to something that's very personal to me. Maybe the reader can't pick up on it, but it was to be downplayed back then. Now, being a part of the story, being a part of the narrative, you have to do that to sustain your business. I started to realize that all you have is your name. All you have is your brand, no matter what company you're at. That company is gonna replace you with somebody younger. That company is gonna go find someone who is going to take half of what you make, right? Your brand is what's gonna get you that next job. And so I try to make sure that when I talk to people coming up, people who are writing, I stress that they are the value, especially in hip hop, because we're bringing the flavor to a lot of these places. I feel like today I want my legacy to be about being able to give back. Yes, people know me from The Source and from writing and producing, but I want people to know my story, know what I stand for, and be able to learn from it. I really want to show people how much value they have in themselves.